You have disturbed my eternal slumber. Now face my wrath.
The pharaoh Ramesses III did not die of old age, and he was not killed by an invading army. He was butchered in his own bedroom by the very women who were sworn to love him.
In the next 20 minutes, we will utilize CT scan data, finalized in early 2026, and forensic reevaluations of the judicial papyrus of Turin to prove that the Great Harem conspiracy wasn't just a palace coup, it was a systemic failure of the Egyptian state that left a god king with his throat severed to the spine. The most chilling evidence, however, isn't found in the king's wounds, but in the unknown man E, the screaming mummy found buried in an unmarked sheepskin. We will finally unmask his identity and his horrific role in the betrayal at the 14-minute mark.
The air in the 20th Dynasty Palace at Medinet Habu is thick, not just with the scent of frankincense and lotus, but with the suffocating humidity of a Mediterranean summer and the static electricity of treason. It is 1155 BCE. Outside these sandstone walls, the sea peoples have been repelled, but the victory is Pyrrhic. The economy is hemorrhaging. The grain rations are late. The king, the living Horus, is no longer seen as an invincible sun, but as a flickering candle. We look through the lens of a 35mm camera, the film grain catching the chiaroscuro shadows cast by flickering oil lamps against the hieroglyphs. We see the queen, Die. She is not a caricature of a villain. She is a mother in the grip of a cold, calculated desperation. Her son, Pentor, is not the heir. To change the course of history, she doesn't need an army. She needs a sharp blade and a network of shadows.
As an archaeologist, I've spent years looking at the blue ocean data of the Ramesses period. Traditionally, historians viewed this conspiracy as a localized event, a jealous wife making a play for the throne. But 2026 forensic archaeology tells a more brutal story. When we look at the high-resolution CT scans of Ramesses III's neck, the wound is roughly 7 centimeters wide. It wasn't a puncture, it was a rhythmic sawing motion. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment assassination. This was a ritualistic execution. The judicial papyrus of Turin serves as our primary transcript of the aftermath. It reads like a modern noir thriller. It lists the conspirators by coded names, binaries of the evil one, or the one who the sun god despises. This wasn't just a trial, it was an attempt to erase their souls from the afterlife. But why go to such lengths? The archaeology of the collapse suggests that by the time of the conspiracy, the fabric of Egyptian divinity had already torn. The workers at Deir el-Medina had staged the first recorded strike in history just years prior. The pharaoh's inability to feed his people had demystified him. The harem, traditionally the sanctuary of the king, became a laboratory for revolution. We are standing in the tactile grit of the desert sand, looking at the ruins of a palace that once housed a god. Now it houses only echoes of a scream that was silenced by linen bandages. We aren't just looking for a murderer, we are looking for the moment. The Egyptian dream died. Now, let us peel back the layers of dust and resurrect the truth of this fallen world.
The camera pans across the stark, unforgiving limestone of the Deir el-Bahari cache. The lighting is harsh, clinical, stripping away the romance of the tomb. We focus on a wooden coffin, unadorned and anonymous. Inside lies a body that defies every law of Egyptian mummification. His mouth is locked in a permanent, silent shriek. His hands are bound. His body is wrapped, not in fine linen, but in the unclean hide of a sheep. This is the physical manifestation of intellectual friction, a corpse that shouldn't exist in a culture obsessed with the dignity of death.
For decades, unknown man E was an archaeological ghost. Some claimed he was a Hittite prince, others a victim of a botched preservation. But the 2026 data, a synthesis of Y chromosomal DNA analysis and 3D dental mapping, has shattered those theories. The genetic markers confirm he is a son of Ramesses III. He is Prince Pantawer, the chosen instrument of the harem conspiracy. The anomaly here isn't just the scream, it's the biological sabotage. In ancient Egypt, the state of your body determined the state of your eternity. By wrapping a prince in sheepskin, the state was effectively performing a soul killing. This is the first clue that the collapse was not just political, but metaphysical.
Look closer at the judicial papyrus. It mentions magical wax figurines and incantations of invisibility smuggled into the harem. To the modern ear, this sounds like folklore. To the 1155 BCE Egyptian, this was high-tech, biological warfare. The conspirators weren't just using knives. They were trying to hack the spiritual mainframe of the kingdom. We shift to the harem quarters. The atmosphere is claustrophobic. Chiaroscuro shadows dance over the cosmetic jars and bronze mirrors. This wasn't a prison of women. It was a high-stakes command center. The 2026 excavation of the servants' quarters near the West Palace revealed something the history books missed: a stash of counterfeit grain tokens. This is the intellectual friction. Why would the harem seats need to forge currency? Because the palace was broke. The conspiracy wasn't fueled by ambition alone. It was fueled by a collapsing supply chain. The king was no longer providing, so the harem took the means of production into their own hands. This changes the entire narrative of the Great Harem Conspiracy. It wasn't a localized palace intrigue. It was a decentralized insurgency. We see evidence of pattern interrupts in the social strata. Over 28 high-ranking officials, including the royal butler, the master of the treasury, and the king's own magicians, were all in on the hit. When we re-examine the king's mummy under the 2026 spectral imaging, a second anomaly appears. Beneath the throat wound, tucked inside the bandages, is a small amulet of the Eye of Horus, placed there by the embalmers after the murder. This was a desperate attempt to heal the king in the afterlife so he could testify against his killers. The state was so terrified of the conspiracy's reach that they had to perform a forensic intervention on a god. The camera slows, focusing on the texture of the papyrus. The ink is dark, aggressive. The scribe's hand trembles as he records the sentences. Some of the accused are forced to commit suicide in the court. Others have their noses and ears lopped off, a sensory deprivation that mirrors the king's own death. The air in the courtroom is heavy with the smell of old cedar and sweat. These men and women were the elite. They were the 1%. Their betrayal proves that the collapse wasn't coming from the sea peoples at the borders. The rot was sitting at the king's right hand.
The data from TDAR, the Digital Archaeological Record, suggests a massive spike in localized inflation immediately following the trial. The execution of the treasury officials left a power vacuum that led to the looting of the royal tombs. within a
Give me more
generation.
leverage.
We often think
It's
of
moving.
empires falling, like a house of cards. The Ramesside collapse was more like a controlled demolition, where the architects were the ones holding the detonator. The screaming man wasn't just a failed usurper. He was the first casualty of a world where the king was no longer a god, but a target. The camera pulls back, leaving the stifling palace for the vast, silent necropolis. The golden hour light of the Egyptian desert bleeds into a deep, bruised purple. We see the silhouette of Ramesses III's mortuary temple, a gargantuan stone testament to a man who died terrified and alone. The scale is monumental, yet the truth is microscopic. The grandeur was a mask for a fragile reality that had already shattered.
When we synthesize the 2026 TDAR data, a haunting human truth emerges from the dust. This wasn't a tragedy of villains, but a tragedy of belief. The harem conspiracy was the moment the Egyptian people realized that their safety was an illusion. The king, the bridge between the divine and the mundane, could be unmade by a piece of sharpened bronze. In the modern era, we look at the collapse of the New Kingdom as a distant, dusty event. But the data reveals a mirror. It shows us that when the social contract is broken, when the grain is withheld, and the leadership becomes insulated from the reality of the street, the inner circle will always turn predatory.
We're almost there.
The screaming man, Prince Pentower, is the ultimate symbol of this. A man born of divinity, buried in the skin of a beast, caught in the gears of a machine that had stopped working. The resolution to the mystery of the collapse isn't found in a lost battle, but in the silence of the judicial papyrus. The state won the trial, but it lost the future. By erasing the names of the conspirators, they tried to delete the evidence of their own vulnerability. But history, like the sand, eventually shifts to reveal what was hidden. The sun sets over the Valley of the Kings, the long shadows stretching like fingers across the limestone. Ramesses III rests in a tomb built for eternity, but his kingdom survived him by barely a century. The ghosts of Medinet Habu warn us an empire doesn't fall from the weight of its enemies, but from the rot within its own heart. Next time, we journey to the frozen north, where a Viking king's burial ship holds a secret that challenges everything we know about the discovery of the New World.